Get our free ebook now and pass the AWS Solutions Architect Associate and Professional exams. Our free content has helped thousands get certified, and it will help you too. Hello, this is Michael Gibbs. I am the founder and CEO of GoCloud Careers, and I am really excited today. I am here with Nick Donarski, who has a security background that is unbelievable. He's worked security in every possible environment. He's dealt with security challenges all over the world in some of the most critical situations. And I am thrilled to be here with Nick Donarski today. Personally, I've been a cloud architect, a network architect, and to some degree a security architect. But when you get guys like Nick and they talk about security, you're dealing with some of the best that are out there. And I am beyond honored and excited to have Nick Donarski from OR Systems here today to talk about security. Nick, I know your background, and it is beyond extraordinary, but could you introduce yourself and talk about your background for about a minute?
Sure, I really appreciate the warm welcome, Mike. I got started way back in the 80s. I wrote my first program in 89 on an Apple IIe. Been around computers literally all my life, and really got started in security back in 1999. My dad was big into computers, spent times in forensics, worked with a lot of law enforcement, three-letter organizations, big enterprises, little enterprises. Was a founding member over at HP Shadow Labs, and it's been one awesome time to be part of, and I've seen the industry grow from literally 56K modems to fiber in your home, and all the rest. It's been an interesting time, and something that I'm blessed to have been able to actually see.
Nick, and thank you for that. And I want to say that Nick is so busy because of how good he is that we have to pre-record this because he's in that high of demand. So, we try and do things locally, but Nick is that good. And like you said, anything from three-letter agencies to everywhere. And truth be told, Nick and I got around this in the same time. I had my first 300 baud modem, which turned into a 1200 baud modem, which turned into a 9600, which turned into a 28.8, and oh my God,
Yes.
56K. That was when we were there. So I've been with you and I've done it. And I got to tell you, Nick, you and I were from the beginning days. Weren't those old days fun days?
They were, man. Back when I was that young and as much of a hooligan as I was back in those days, alligator clips and RJ11 cables connected to a laptop and sitting on somebody's rooftop was a whole lot more fun, back in the day. Security was just different. You didn't have the security budgets that organizations put into it nowadays, and security was just an afterthought for a lot of these systems. So back then it was the Wild West. It was the heydays.
It really was. And I remember these days because for the most part, nothing worked. And it was people like you and me and those of us, we'd find people. It was like, okay, there's 1,000 IT people. These two know what they're doing. So call them every time you've got a project.
Absolutely. You'd go to the computer stores and they used to have those plastic hangers on the walls with the 3.5 discs with printed labels or written labels on stuff, man. It was a cool time.
It was, and you probably did it too. I actually had a punch, and we could punch the disc so we could use both sides of the disc.
Yes. Man, and now we're going down memory lane. iOmega jazz drives and zip drives and everything during that time, and man, it was crazy. All the cool different things that you had. The length of time I've been around, I even got to handle 5.25 discs myself. So.
There you go. And that means you probably, like me, worked on clouds 20 some years ago, whether that had been Frame Relay, ISDN, VPLS, RFC 2547.
Yep. Ring networks and Frame Relay, baby.
Oh, yeah. I really remember those token ring networks. I had this little thing that would click, and a little ball would go. Wow, those days were fun. The mainframes, the IPX, the Apple Talk.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
man, it's amazing being in this industry. As long as I have, you still run into every once in a while an AS400 that's still pumping and still churning, man. And there's still some of that ancient gear that's still out there.
I've
The
yet to
funny
consult.
part is nobody else is around besides us that have actually had our hands on that stuff anymore. They don't teach that stuff anymore.
And you bring about something amazing. They're not teaching the old tech anymore. And you know what? We've built a whole career on teaching the old tech and a business. And here's why: all these people want all these new modern jobs, migrate all this stuff in the network and the data center, the cloud as a cloud architect, but they don't learn the old tech. So how do
That's
you move what
exactly
you
it.
don't know? If you
That's
don't know what a
exactly it.
mainframe is, you can't move it. If you don't understand what block storage is, you can't move it. If you don't understand how to take your 30,000 VMs or virtual machines to the cloud, you can't move them just because you know the name of a service and how to configure it. So we used to learn how the tech worked. And
Yep.
I know you learned how it worked. I learned in order to design it as an architect like me, you needed to do it. But as an ethical hacker, you needed to know how it worked too, because you couldn't break it if you didn't know how it worked.
Well, honestly, when we got started, if you couldn't build it or you couldn't make it, you couldn't get it to work anyway. I mean, I remember when you used to have to compile your own drivers. Back in the days of Slackware. If you want to get old school with some of the Linux distros that are out there.
Yeah, I used to have. I had a buddy that could compile code to me every time I needed something to work on Red Hat back when it was free. I will never code. That is not my thing. I'm an architecture. I took a coding class at Sun Microsystems. It was torture for me. I was like, you can't
Sure.
possibly expect me to do this. Never, 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 never. It's not networking. It's not security, and it's not design. I am not interested.
And I mean, I remember when Novell came out, and that was bleeding edge,
It
man.
was.
Yeah, Novell on NT40, baby. That was beauty.
I rolled out Novell networks everywhere because the Windows servers weren't reliable. So
Yep.
until I could convince people to use Red Hat, I was using Novell netware for the servers, and I was using Windows NT for the clients. And you know what? Windows NT 4.0 wasn't too bad.
Man, I will say NT40 was one of the best Windows that they ever did. It was sleek. It was clean. It worked. You didn't have a lot of major issues. I mean, you didn't have all the bloatware and stuff that they were trying to cram down in '98 and all those kind of fun
Oh, it was
XP
clean.
XPs and CEs and Millennium
Yeah.
editions of.
Windows NT was the last Windows notebook desktop that I had. I
Yes.
went Red Hat for a while. And when I went Red Hat, which I loved, I ultimately had a Windows machine that I could do Visio on because
Sure.
the virtual machine performance was too bad. So for a while, I carried two. And then out of nowhere, Apple came up with a BSD Unix-based operating system.
Yep.
And I've switched to it. And every once in a while, my Mac doesn't work. So I have to use my Threadripper system. And you know what? I can't use it. Doesn't matter how good it is, I can't use it. So, going into security stuff, we've all seen some fun things. One of the things that I find absolutely hilarious is certification people are teaching the architecture of designing a Bastion host. Now, if you've messed up and need a backdoor in, I get it, but you're a security architect. Would you intentionally design a Bastion host? Why or why not?
No, I mean, if you go core fundamental architecture design, right? You actually design with security in mind, going into it. There's no reason to utilize a Bastion host, right? There's so many other things that you can use to manage your authentication, your logging, your everything that will be more functional and more fundamentally secure, right? It also doesn't give a single honeypot
Yeah.
to everything that goes in there, right? But that being said, there are organizations out there that have no other option,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you start to, organizations that I work with that are massive, that have bought companies over the last 20 years. They don't do an architecture review before, the board buys an organization for most cases, other than, have you done your pen test? You know, that's the extent of a lot of the reviews. So then they purchase and they acquire these organizations. They try to slam these different architectures together, different cloud providers, different systems, and everything else, and they don't have a clean network.
No.
In those cases, if there is no other option, that's better than nothing.
And I totally agree with that. I was in the position most of my life with Cisco where a company would buy another company and they'd say, okay, now how do we make it work long
Hmm.
term? And it was like, okay, we can do this Band-Aid for the next month. And hopefully, and in the meantime, we're going to put these devices in, these lines in, these channels in, and now we've got a secure private way for your systems to talk to each other. Your systems have been readdressed. There's no longer overlapping IP address space. Now we've route summarization. But yeah, I'm with you. Now, the other funny thing that's funny is you've been around a long time. So, and you work with mostly special operations warriors. So,
I work with military guys through a long period of my career.
and because you're working in these super high security, high availability performance requirements, if I design a network, it's not all on Verizon. It's on some Verizon, some AT&T, because when Verizon goes down, if I'm all on Verizon, I'm down. And Azure tells people use multiple clouds. Google tells people to use multiple clouds. And for some reason, AWS says, here, we got you covered. Put all your eggs in our basket. Trust us. Don't worry. Now, we may have a power failure in the data center, which may take down the whole globe. Not that I even know how you have a power failure in the data center. I've never seen one in 25 years. But, that's neither here nor there. But I've also never seen an impaired network that took down half the globe either. I mean, I know BGP problems, I know network security problems, access rules, but I don't know what an impaired network is unless you get a router and a router that go to a bar and get drunk together. But I don't know. But would you ever consider designing something that matters on a single cloud or a single data center?
No, I mean security is always, two is one, right? You want to make sure that you have more failover, disaster recovery. Those types of things are inherent in what security is. It's planning for the stuff you didn't plan for, right?
Yes.
It's that mentality of I didn't even think about that, but thank God I did this 2 years ago because I was trying to do something right. The making sure that have failover, multiple cloud provider, multiple systems, especially if you're talking about critical systems, business critical systems, anything that your organization requires triple nine uptime on. There's no way that you can get that from a single provider.
No.
That's where the necessity comes with whatever that combination is. I mean, whether that's AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud, whatever it is. I mean, a server sitting in the back of your basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's better having that than not having anything at all. Again, having something that you can fall back to will allow you to actually make forward progression. It's being proactive versus reactive. Security's made an industry of being reactive. It's about teaching people to be proactive, to not have to be reactive.
And I think you hit that on the spot. That's what we're really talking about. Whether it's an architecture at Cisco, whether Juniper's designing it, IBM's designing it, is look, there's known and knowable variables, but there's also the unknown and the unknowable. And we don't know what's going to happen. And we have to assume bad things are happening. I will assume that AWS will fail. I know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And I know Azure's going to fail too. And I know Google's going to fail. And guess what? They're all going to get hacked too.
Sure.
It may not happen tomorrow, but it is an inevitability. So what do I need to do to protect myself from that? Because nothing's perfect. And even when you have the best people, stuff still happens.
Absolutely. And I mean, you look at the outages that were BGP, that's an old protocol. If you look at all of the types of things that are out there nowadays, and it still affects the biggest providers.
And it's amazing. When I learned BGP 25 years ago, first it was complicated, and then I did nothing other than BGP for 5 years straight.
Sure.
And then it became simple. But, I took my career a little different. People were like, Mike, would you like to learn this? And I'd say, no, you want me to be your BGP architect. I need to focus on this. Hey, Mike, learn wireless. No, if I learn wireless, I can't focus on your internet routing. Hey, Mike, I got a new idea. Let's talk about this cool technology. No, that's a great cool technology for someone else, but you want me to be your network architect. I need to have to design the routing. Now, you want me to design your RFID taggings. That's great. That's somebody else, but I can only know one thing well.
Well, and I'll tell you what, there's a misconception in the security industry, especially when you're talking about like penetration testers and things like that, that the best pen tester is somebody that can write code fast. The best pen tester is somebody that can crack, passwords within no time. Write O days. Honestly, the best experience in all of the years that I've been doing this, as long as I've been a team lead, I don't look for somebody that necessarily has a history in pen testing unless there's something that is some specialty role that I'm looking to fill. I want somebody that's an expert in the field that we're actually attacking, right?
Mhm.
If we're going against somebody who I know has RFID systems for access ways, I don't need a general network guy or somebody who can write O days. I need a guy who's actually put RFID systems on doorways, right? I want that network engineer who spent the last 20 years being a network engineer and knows how all of those intimate details, and then goes, oh well, you know, I presented a patch 20 years ago for this, and they still haven't fixed it. They call it an undocumented feature now. You
Yeah,
know, I
extra
want I
feature.
want that guy. And that's what makes security good, is when you have true experts in the various different disciplines that come together as a team, as opposed to necessarily somebody that you know churns out O days all day long.
Yeah, and I'd rather hire the same thing. I don't, people are like, Mike, I want to do this, 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 and this. And I say, okay, but you're not hireable. I literally have people that say, Mike, I want to be an architect or a designer. And they say, so I'm going to start by learning Python. And then I'm going to learn Bash and PowerShell scripting. And then I'm going to learn Terraform and DevOps. And I say, great, but you're not an architect. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, you know how to code and configure, but where's your training in system design? Where's your training in CXO relevancy? Where's your training in leadership? Where's your training in sales? What are you going to do at this conference with 5,000 people in the audience? How are you going to do a site survey? How are you going to manage these 50 engineers? And they say, but I need to know that. And I say, no, you don't need to know that. I say, I don't need to know how to code to know how to design a network. And I say, a pilot does not need to know what a flight attendant does to be able to fly the plane. The pilot needs to fly that plane, and you need to be him or her to be real good at that. And I
That's
need my
exactly it.
security architect to be extremely good. My penetration testers, I want them to have to break into systems. My defensive security people, I want them to know defensive security. I want all of them to have people skills so they can really figure out how to break into systems, talking to people.
And
And
that's how
I care
you.
more
That's
about
how
their
you.
emotional intelligence and leadership than any of it.
And that's how you're a successful leader, right? For as long as I've been doing this, I mean, HP offered me a management title when I had to go through the promotional stages that they kind of push you through, right? I refused to take the title of manager because that's not how I think that my style is. Team lead. I'm a team leader, right? I work for that middle ground for making sure that my guys have everything that they absolutely need to get the job done. They're skilled with the right tools, techniques, projects, training, and everything else that they can do. And I have that interface with the business side of the house, making sure that whatever those resources are that my team has. And that's where you get good leadership, right? Is when you believe in your team stands up for you, you stand up for them, and that's what makes you successful.
Yeah, and I did the team lead thing for a while, and I actually loved it because I
Yep.
still got to be one of them and not there. And then as I moved up into bigger roles, what ultimately happened was I was an unofficial team lead. And what do I mean by that? I asked every one of the engineers that would work for me, what's your goal career? And this would say, I want to move into architecture, I want to manage. Okay. Now, can you work with me for this 32-week project? Yes. Okay. When you are done, you're going to be here, you're going to be here, you're going to be here. And that's what I did. I'd work on getting them to their goals. I'd be one of them. I'd be there every day in the trenches, buy lunch, buy dinners, buy drinks, dealing with the emotional debrief of the day of the customer that yelled at them, dealing with all the things that we needed to do because you got to be with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. First off, it's you have to be with them because you need to know what they know, and you need to be able to trust that they have the best information, and then that gives them trust in you.
Yes.
It's much different, taking a leadership role and just pointing and telling people to do things versus getting in there and actually doing it with them.
It is, and your results are so different. I remember I had a job, and the office was 48 miles away, but it was in New York City. Now, I
Sure.
don't enjoy going to New York City ever. I was living in Princeton, New Jersey, and I don't like going to New York. It's a great city. There's nothing wrong with the city,
Sure.
but I don't like being in a big city. So I had a choice of taking a 2-hour train each day or driving to my customer, which was one of the world's largest bank that was 10 minutes from my house. So where do you think I went? I went to the customer every single day.
Absolutely.
Now, what was pretty interesting with that going to the customer every single day is my team of engineers, they would complain. Mike's not going to the office. He's not going to the office. And my manager would say, yeah, when you bring in as much as Mike does, close as many deals, I'll listen to what you have to say. But he brought in 3 times more because he sat at the customer site. He listened to what the customer wanted. There's 50 engineers doing a proof of concept, and Mike's there buying them dinner, drinks, and listening to what they have to say and listening to what the customers has to say. So you've got a choice in how you take your career. You could choose to just come to the office and complain about Mike all day long, or you can go be active and interact with the customer and solve their problems. Which do you want to do?
Absolutely.
I know where you were, Nick. You were hands dirty, rolled up in that career.
Still am. Still punching keys to this day, man.
I gotta love that because some days I want to get so techie and geeky, but I pull back and the reason I pull back, and I know you pulled back too. You founded a company, and the reason
Yep.
you're doing more leadership stuff and team lead stuff is because that's where you want to be.
It is, man. Our system is a dream. Our goal is to be able to bring blockchain to, we like to call it white collar tools for blue collar folks, right? We want to simplify blockchain for everybody. And we're focusing on the game space, and we want to make sure that video gaming, right, isn't just known as crypto gaming or anything else either, because you can have blockchain
Yeah.
without having crypto, and that teaching people that there's a difference between the technology and the crypto piece is something that we've had to get over through the course of doing this project, right? I jumped into it. I was like, oh, I just want to make video games for a living, and I had this grand idea of doing it on blockchain. Well, it became a much bigger thing. I spent over a year developing the software around how to actually do it. And in the early days, I was like, if I'm putting all this time and effort into doing the development for myself, right? I looked at all the off the shelf tools and everything, and there wasn't anything that just really did it fundamentally feasible for the end user. And so as I started writing this, I was like, well, I'm assuming somebody else out there wants this stuff too, and that's where I took the leap, and through that I've been able to put together an awesome team. Jonah, Lucas, Sean, all leadership roles here, and all former vets here. As part of our system, doing something fun, doing something cool, doing something different. I mean, when's the last time or for me, I never else had an opportunity to say that I was going to leave security and go and be in the video game business. So, that's a dream come true for me.
And good for you. And Sean and John and Lucas, I got to tell you, you're dealing with a world class team there. People that are smart,
Absolutely, man.
motivated, and will succeed. Because those guys, they don't know the meaning of failure. And,
Nope.
there's 2 attitudes. There's some people that plan for failure and other people that plan for success. Those guys plan for success and they win. And
Every
there's some
single
people
day.
that are all worried about what happens when things fail. They focus on how to make things successful. There's 2 kinds out there. You got to figure out which kind of leader you are. I plan to make things successful, but I also plan for what happens and how do I survive things. But it's choose your leadership, and there are types that want to make the world better that can do it. So
Absolutely.
I think you've got there. So I love blockchain, and I fell into blockchain by accident through cryptocurrency mining.
Sure.
And I remember I was setting up a big blockchain data center a couple of years ago with some friends, and they were like, "Hey, Mike, what happens if this Bitcoin and Ethereum thing die?" And I say, that's the start of this. That's the impetus to drive this. That's not the blockchain thing.
Yep.
I said, the blockchain is going to give us smart contracts. The blockchain is going to work with RFID, and we're going to find our tech and our gear when we need it, where we can't find it. The blockchain is going to improve this. And let me tell you, the blockchain is going to make every part of our lives better. So here, I'll set you up with your cryptocurrency mining now. And because the guy had a warehouse
Sure.
like 18 megawatts of power coming in somehow, he had that many transformers. So I was like, okay, an entire city in Kansas is now crypto mining. But that was the impetus. Now they're ready for other blockchain stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah. I mean,
that,
it's it's not the next thing to slice bread or anything else. The technology is fantastic though for when you apply it right. It's just like anything else. Whether you're talking about cloud environments, whether you're talking about security products, when you apply blockchain as a technology to things like logistics, when you apply it to telematics, when you apply it to record keeping, transactional records, that's where the power of blockchain comes in. When you start to look at the combination of things, of not just 100% public blockchain, but also those semi-public, those private blockchains, right? That you know organizations don't necessarily want all of their data on the public network, right? They don't necessarily want full access to everything, because that's not how core organizations work.
no,
Corporations, businesses, they have their trade secrets and things like that. But to be able to leverage that technology without, say, SEC
yeah,
regulations and things like that that are inherent in like Ethereum, and the way that the EVM machines work, and that are inherent with proof of work or proof of stake type blockchains, right? You get rid of those restrictions, those regulations, and you go to a more pure technology. All of a sudden, it's not so scary. I like to say that blockchain is just another distributed database. That's
oh, it is.
really all it is.
And that's the thing. And I wonder which one's going to make it. So we started out with distributed computing on the basis of giving the money to the people. And then we get a couple of billionaires that create their own cryptocurrency to try and centralize the world's money supply in only a few billionaires' hands. I personally think the distributed blockchains are going to make it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, history will tell. I definitely don't think that all of these projects that are out there are going to
No.
be around for the length of this, right? And regulation is going to come.
Yep.
Rules are going to come, things like that. My goal, being in as early as we are, is to help be somewhat of a steward to some of those things that are coming down, because being able to have that conversation, especially having the resources that we have, like I said, Jonah, Lucas, and Sean being vets, they have access to those decision makers, those future decision makers that are looking at these things right now. We're part of the Texas Blockchain Council. We're part of a number of other community groups that are looking at trying to be that starter of what does good regulation look like, before it ever becomes overregulation, before it ever becomes too burdensome that it kills off the technology. How do you what's the right word, functionally regulate the crypto industry without completely bursting the crypto industry.
And that's done right, it can be improved. Done wrong, I mean, it can just destroy it. And I don't know what we'll do, but you know what, having a couple of special operations warriors dealing with other people is a little better than lobbyists that are paid to get whatever their paid lobbying fees are accomplished.
Absolutely, I'll take my guys any day of the week.
I'd take your guys any day of the week too. I know what they've done. I know how far they protected us, how much they've done for our safety, and all we can say is thank you to them. They're some pretty incredible
Absolutely,
people.
I say thank you every single day.
And every time I see them, I feel the same way, and I'm very grateful for all they've done. It's interesting when we get into security. Now, I know what I do. When I teach cloud architects, I teach vendor neutral things because, what I like to use works everywhere. Because, two is one is none, and three is better than two. So, if I live that way, it really does my architectural decisions. So, for example, when I do security, I am likely to use a third-party thing that I can use in 3 different clouds.
Sure.
I tend to avoid. No, I'd like you're the real security world, the end-to-end enterprise architect guy that designs your billion-dollar architectures, and I find the security people like you to help me with the security, because that's what big enterprise architects do. They find the world's best and they bring them in, and that's how you do it. Would you be using things like if you had the pure architectural choice, would you use those cloud native services that are vendor proprietary, developed by the vendor itself? Or would you go to look for something like a Cisco or a Palo Alto or a Fortinet that's designed by a security company you can use in multiple clouds?
I'm right tool for the right job, right? The third party architectures, the third party vendors, things like Okta, Duo, all of those types of MFA vendors. The beauty of them is that they do expand to the multiple platforms, right? You can use them through disparate systems, you can use them through mobile, you can use them through all of the things that most enterprises are going to need, right?
Yep.
And by having that single management, that single pane of glass, I don't like buzzwords too much, but that single pane of glass, right? It makes the fundamental management of all of those different pieces just easier. That reduces the time that the engineers have to spend on trying to track down issues, trying to reset passwords, trying to do any of that kind of stuff. It makes that functional. Flip side of that is if an organization doesn't fundamentally have the exposure, right, to necessitate that level of security, it doesn't make fundamental sense to
Yes.
secure yourself against a theoretical actor versus taking good fundamental steps if you aren't if you don't have that attack surface, that attack
Yeah.
visibility, or have something that you have a true reason to protect. And that's a general statement. Everybody has something to protect, but just be a pet grooming shop in Cincinnati, Ohio, has a much smaller risk profile and attack service than a global ISP.
Totally agree with you. And I like to tell my students is like, look, if we're talking about a website for my cat Cindy and pictures of Cindy, I'm using AWS WAF and Shield every day of the week, because if you get access to my cat Cindy, I mean, you got some cool photos of her. But
Right.
if I'm dealing with military trade secrets or intellectual property that's worth something, I'm not going to use some proprietary cloud service that's like hobbyist grade. I'm
Yeah.
going to use something that's done by a real organization that's got enterprise grade functionality. But what determines what you secure? What are you securing?
Exactly.
How?
Understanding what data what is your critical data, what data is at risk, all of those fundamental questions that go into building a real security program are more important than any tool you'll buy and plug in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I totally get that. What are you doing? How you're doing? And why are you doing it? Yeah, it totally makes sense. Now, when people want to get started out in penetration testing, what I typically tell them is to do the following: to get a server, put VMware ESXi on the server, put a whole bunch of virtual machines on the server, take their Linux, convert it to Kali Linux, take their desktop, get rid of it, run Kali Linux as a primary operating system, and trying to hack into everything.
Well, one thing I will say, and this was taught to me at an early age, is never hack from home, man. That's rule number one.
A fair point. Well, you can hack your own stuff at home, but you don't
Hack
hack
your own
anybody.
stuff at home, but whatever else you do, I
Yeah,
can't.
don't do it at home. Don't do it with your IP address or any place where your IP address is trackable. And don't
Well,
think the
yeah.
VPN is going to do it.
But my dad was the biggest reason I got into this, man. Early on, he was always like, if you hack my stuff, just know what you did, right? If you break it, just know how you broke it and figure it out. And I credit him to being able to do what I do today.
It's really interesting because, like, I've tried to learn how to use tools in my life. And let me tell you, it is embarrassing. I'm like a bear with a screwdriver in my hand or a cat with a saw. It's just pathetic. But, I remember walking into a Radio Shack 25 years ago and watching the guy take my computer apart and stick some RAM in there. And I was like, I like it
Yeah,
so much that I literally used to go there every day. I learned that, and that's what made me move into networking, because I thought it was so exciting taking it apart and putting it back together.
absolutely, man.
And that's really what I miss from those old tech days, where we just had fun. I
It
mean, it was
was. It was just for the fun of it. It was just for the fun of it. Everything changed, especially in the security industry. It's just becomes such fiscally driven, that you have so many vendors, you have so many tools and stuff that everybody's out trying to make a buck. You know, me, I'm still just a tech nerd. I still consider myself just a tech nerd.
and I considered myself that for a long time, and then ultimately I had to change because my job forced me to change. And every time I went techie, it was like my manager was like, your replacement will thank you. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I can't go tech anymore. And I didn't. And it offered me great things, but I still miss it. And every time there's a brand new piece of tech, it's like, I got to go buy it. And I know it sounds crazy. Apple's got a new Mac Studio. I don't need it. I got the MacBook Pro that I bought, fully maxed out 3 weeks ago, and a 64 core Threadripper that's actually my desktop. But you know what? I had to buy it anyway because
Yep.
I'll play with it for 3 weeks and then I'll sell it on eBay. I just have to know. And then when the Mac Pro comes out, I'm going to do the same darn thing because I have to tinker with it. I have to play.
That's the best way to learn, man. Is just learn hands on. There's so many certificate programs out there that are just they're certificate mills. They're just there to take your money to pump you out into the industry, and they don't really truly provide you benefit. The way that I always told people was, if you're going to go through a certificate program, go into it knowing something, because they're not going to teach you anything. They're not there to teach you something. They're there to get you the cert. That's it. That's why training programs like yours that actually work through the entire process of it, the focus on actually making somebody skilled, is something that is different than what the majority of people are doing out there. And I give you credit, man, because it's much harder to actually teach people than to just give them that piece of paper. You know, and it's a whole different ball of wax when somebody actually has the skills versus just saying I've got those letters on my name, or anything else out there. It's a credit to what you're doing, man.
Thanks, Nick. And I really work on the professional development. How do you do the job? Making them great at the job, teaching the business, leadership, emotional intelligence, sales, so they have any career. Because in my experience, when you're transitioning careers, let's say you've got one of your fantastic special operations warriors. Now we're dealing with someone that's smart, someone that's extraordinarily motivated, someone that is highly successful and intelligent beyond belief on average. That's what we're dealing with. But, how do you take that career and then transition the leadership styles to, say, the civilian world, and then transition the civilian things that matter and translate, MOS to this is my career, for example, and, start, and you know what? It's amazing what happens when you just change these little things and you address the whole package. It was different 25 years ago when we started our tech career.
Sure.
In those days, the tech didn't work. And, I know what you had to do with getting your modems working or getting a security thing or a firewall up and running. You put in a firewall and then the whole system breaks. And then it's up to how smart you are to debug everything by going to machine to figure out what silly thing is blocking what. And I know you know how to do that. And in those days, getting 30 certifications was cool because nothing worked and all we needed was tech. But once the tech started to work and the tech became somewhat automated, now it's about what we can make the tech do, not the tech. It's not about the tech anymore. And people haven't adapted.
Yeah.
The certification mills are just teaching the tech. And, I didn't intend to start this program. I didn't intend to. It happened. I was helping set up a blockchain data center in McPherson, Kansas. And when we opened it up, I think we had 500 GPUs and 1,500 ASIC miners. So, that was the start. And, firewalls and IPS systems. And we were using VMware ESXi for things that we couldn't use a digital wallet. We were creating virtual machines that were shut down at all times that we could just turn on and that would be the wallet.
Yep.
Until we could use hardware wallets. We had all kinds of cool stuff going in there. And we had fun. But what happened was the owner of the building that we were all using said, teach my kids skills. And I said, sure. He says, what's the best career right now? And I said, it's either blockchain or cloud architecture. And he says, cloud architecture. So I send a kid, I buy him 3 certification courses, literally speaking, and I say, I'll coach him for 2 to 4 hours on Friday. I can't believe this, Nick. The kid called me after 3 days and he said, Mike, I've set up an S3 bucket and EC2 instance. What are they? And I literally mean, what do you mean, what are they? I figured he was, a lazy kid.
Sure.
I literally watched these 3 command certification courses in horror. They literally mentioned a name and how to configure it without teaching anybody what it was.
Oh, I'm sure. I do not doubt that at all. I do not doubt that at all.
I mean, it was so bad that I decided I was going to interview 1,000 AWS certified people to see if any of them knew something. Not even of the 1,000, Not more than 2 even knew what a virtual machine was.
That's scary.
Now, they all knew how to code, which is irrelevant because architects don't code.
Sure.
They all knew how to maintain things, but none of them knew how to design a single thing. And I went, okay, we've got to do something about this. And that's why we did it.
That's the power to the program, man. And, you know, I definitely believe in what you're doing.
And thanks. And we really appreciate that. And so I got to ask you more about security because I love getting involved with these hands-on techies because you guys are really what makes it work. And I'm sure you've worked with lots of architects in your career.
I've been around 1 or 2.
Yeah, and the really good ones are basically the people that know how to coordinate things, manage things, and bring all of you guys in the room to go design stuff.
Yep.
Now, the worst architects are the people that think they're smart enough to do it.
Or they're the only one that can do it.
Are they the only one that can do it? Here, I'm your security guy. I'm also your network guy and your application guy. Yeah, I know what that looks like. Hobbyist knowledge and everything is a disaster. I can call you and you ask you do my security. We're not getting hacked for a while.
Well, I mean, and that's the whole thing is like you know, my dad made the comment, and it's always kind of stuck with me, you know, from early on was, you know, you got to pick a specialty. If you look at doctors, right, general practitioners make a decent living, but you don't make bank unless you got a specialist, unless you're a neurosurgeon, unless you're a cardiac surgeon, or whatever that specialty is, right? So my family being that I came from a medical, my dad fireman paramedic, my mom ER nurse, so like that's what I came up in. So you know, it's the specialty that really gives you that career growth that allows you to excel. And that's, you know, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, being a specialist in your core discipline will make you more valuable than being you know, general you know, just having general good, you know, skills across everything.
And that's what I tell people. So I come from medicine. It's funny. I paid my way through the university by being a firefighter paramedic. And then I became a nurse. Then I became a nurse practitioner, practiced internal medicine, and went, yeah, no. But what I did, and I learned very quickly in networking, which is the skill that I learned from medicine. I'm not going to be a jack of all trades. I went through years of being Mr. BGP.
Yep.
And then what happened is we started with this voice, data, and video. And around 2001, I became Mr. IP multicast. And for 5 years, I did nothing other than IP multicast video. Went all over the world, was deploying video in the Middle East and South America and England, Europe, all over the country, and loved it.
Sure.
And did the same thing. But the key is I picked one thing. So, you know, I love that. Now, you know, when you guys talk blockchain at OR, I got to tell you, I love OR systems. Every kind of discussion I've had with you guys has been beyond amazing. And,
I appreciate that.
When I speak with your special operations warriors, or I speak with you, I see some real substance there, and I kind of love that. What's your mission for the world? Because I know when I see it and I see what you're doing with blockchain, it excites me so much. Tell our audience, because we've got a pretty big audience, what it is you're doing to change the world.
So our goal is to really kind of free up the gaming system, right? It's to bring the gaming system back to the gamer, as I like to say. All of the video games, of all of my years playing video games, all of the many different items, in-game things that I all bought that went to nothing, in games that have no idea of even existence anymore, right? What we're doing is we're bringing blockchain to next gen gaming, and we're doing it at scale, and we're doing it so that we can actually showcase it in AAA gaming, right? It's not just card games, it's not just these 2D platformers. You can do it in first person shooters, you can do it in MMORPGs. You can actually use blockchain at scale for video games and for the enterprise, right? So we're building the fundamental, what I like to call our ecoverse, right? We're bigger than a metaverse. We've got all of the architecture that goes into everything that builds it. So you've got the SDK that allows coders, application developers to actually plug and play with blockchain right in their code. You don't have to be a blockchain developer to actually write your blockchain game anymore. You know, you actually get to focus on making a game. I started this project trying to make a game that I still haven't made. So we just released Osiris Protocol, which is our proof of concept. It's a multiplayer first-person shooter. But even the game that I started on before this whole project, I still haven't made, and I'm still getting, working on being that blockchain engineer. For a game developer, you don't have to do that. You can take all of the hurdles, all of those things that we've seen over the course of the development, and integrate that into your game or your app, and you simplify the process, you reduce the time to do it, and you make it faster the time to get your game done. We've got the NFT integration through our NFT marketplace, so you can have your in-game items as NFTs. I mean, for me, I still have a World of Warcraft account. I didn't get started on vanilla. I started on Burning Crusades. But it's been a huge, huge, game for the course of my life, right? If those items had been NFTs, they could have grown in value over that time. So now you can actually create a ecosystem of value of the game items of something that you can take into the future. And then the beauty of the whole thing is that you're not locked into one game. That content, right, for our Osiris Protocol game, right, our first person shooter, we've got like 94 different in-game items, 73 of them are NFTs, right? So yeah, so you can go on, you can buy that NFT, you can actually, buy it on the marketplace on our Or Forge. You can use it in the game, and then say you want to trade in for something else. You can put that up for auction or for sale right on the marketplace again. Get some coin back out of that, and then go on and upgrade and buy your stuff. The freedom of actually owning that in-game item to do whatever you want is just huge, right? And then having that hub system, that core elemental system that's running what Or system really is, that architecture, that allows you to take those games and branch them into other ones. So as we release future games as part of our platform, we can take those same Osiris items that were released in that one game and take them to a completely different type of title. We can take a first person shooter item to an MMORPG or to a racing game or to any of that kind of stuff. It just opens up the ability for us to give ownership back to the actual gamer and back to the actual developer. The other part about that is that if you look at Steam, you look at the Play Store, you look at any of these other big distribution channels out there, they take 30% of the revenue from each one of
Oh my
these
God.
developers. Yeah, 30% of what that price is on Steam goes directly to Steam. We do it for 2.3%.
Wow.
2.3%. It's on the NFTs, and you as that creator get to determine what that royalty is. So now that NFT, say somebody likes your game and you only put out a couple of them, or you run into the garage sale scenario where somebody just doesn't play it anymore and they want to get rid of it. If they resell that NFT, you continue to get that royalty for the rest of life. So you don't lose out on that second-hand revenue, that third-hand revenue that developers and content creators do right now. A musician, they only get their royalty the first time that music is sold, right? Whether it's
Right.
Walmart and a CD or iTunes or whatever it is, they only get their royalty that first time. Through us, if somebody turns around and sells that at, say, a disco round or a garage sale, they never see any money. Utilizing an NFT for that secondhand trade or that secondhand, they continue to get those royalties that are made into it forever. And we've got a lot of cool new things that we're building. Integration of Hyperledger for gasless systems on the back end allows us to have bridged and cross-chain support for the NFTs and gaming of the future. Secured blockchain so that you can actually have auditing functions for enterprise solutions. We've got a couple of clients in the automotive industry and the logistics industry that are looking for that managed service. There's huge growth that's coming for our system. I'm so proud to be, a member of this, and I may have been that original, but I'm not the only one here, and we don't have success without everybody that's involved, man.
Nick, I know you're the founder, and that's the most critical thing that I've ever heard anybody say, and it's true. It's never one person's anything. I know of nothing good that's one person. People are like, Mike, your company's great. I'm like, yeah, that's because I've got a great team. There's no one person that can do anything that's that great. I had some friends that were part of another group. They'd say there's no John Rambos. There's teams of people that get things done.
That's
In our
right.
place, there's a certain number of people per platoon, but there's no John Rambos. There's groups of people that get things done, and I've always seen it. I think we're only as good as our team. Now, people used to go to eBay to sell these kind of things, didn't they?
Yeah, and there was secondary markets. I mean, you go back into, actually, you want to go into kind of the dark resources of the old age. World of Warcraft Gold was like the very first cryptocurrency, long before it was ever called a cryptocurrency. I mean, the World of Warcraft Gold was able to be used for real world items. There were restaurants, hotels, things like that around the world that would actually take that as valid currency. And there's some organized crime organizations out there that actually used it for money laundering and things like that long before Bitcoin ever existed. So the the native fundamentals of what cryptocurrency is, blockchain, NFT items, it's synonymous with those video game items that everybody's been using. It's just the underlying technology is different. It's more robust, it's scalable, it's got the immutable qualities of that single timestamp and entity on that chain. There's just huge benefits that you can grow with it. The hurdle has always been the requirement for crypto for paying gas fees and the restriction on the end user for having to require cryptocurrencies where they may not either be legal or available or things like that. By moving to the type of things of like Hyperledger Fabric and blockchains of the future, where you become agnostic of that layer one, now on the front end, you can offer global support and different types of things that, from the front end development standpoint, you can utilize other purchasing mechanisms or trading mechanisms or whatever, and it can still happen on the blockchain. Building that out to be able to take those items through bridges into the other environments like Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, Avalanche. Those are all on our growth path, so that you're not, although you're using that, you're still not tied just to that system. The goal isn't to tie you into the system. The goal is to allow the system to make it accessible to everybody else.
Yeah, I like it. Make the systems that's going to be successful for everybody others. Because I've been playing with this blockchain thing for a while, and they're all over the place.
They are,
Here's my
man.
proprietary thing. No, my proprietary thing. No, we're going to use this one, but not this one. Oh, wait, we're going to fork this one. We're going to go in this different. Like, seriously, pick something.
Well, and it's still the same thing, right? You look at Disney's future metaverse. You look at Facebook's future metaverse. You're still siloed into that vendor. You're still siloed. You can't take your Disney metaverse gear over to your Facebook, metaverse and
that's
all the rest.
ridiculous.
And that's what I'm saying. If you provide the architecture that allows you as the developer to decide where you want to go, that's where the power is.
And all that comes from using open standards and staying away from all this vendor proprietary nonsense.
It is, man.
And it's very interesting because everything we've taught in our architecture world is the same thing you're doing. We're saying, look, if you need an OSQL database, don't use Amazon's DynamoDB and Microsoft's Cosmos and Google's Cloud Bigtable. Use Mongo and run it on all three clouds and don't lock yourself in.
Exactly.
Same thing for a blockchain. I don't have to use the Ethereum blockchain. I can figure out whatever it is and build something that's going to work for everything. And, that's where we find it. It's like we find certain organizations like AWS that are trying to force people into proprietary lockdown. You can't get into solutions. And then the rest of us that want to innovate, we're like, no, that's not the way. The way to innovate is to not lock ourselves down like we're in prison with handcuffs to a single proprietary thing. It's to make sure that our technology enables us to find the best and brightest minds from all over the world, not just from one company.
Absolutely. 100%.
So there's those kind of things. So yeah, we're trying to go both at the same place, trying to get the world to innovation. And honest innovation means open standards and not things. So, then Nick, with decades worth of security experience, what would you tell your 22-year-old self that wanted to move into security? Because they're the kind of people that I have.
Don't be afraid of failure. I mean, I know it's kind of cheesy to say that, but for real, don't be afraid of failure and learn from it. You know, don't don't be afraid of it. Failure is good as long as you learn something from it, right? You know, it's the insanity of repeating the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result, right? You know, if you're too scared to do something different, you're never going to see a different result. You know, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to stand up and take responsibility for your own failure, right? That's the other thing probably for my 20-year-old self, is be be okay with failure. People understand failure as long as you take that responsibility for it and you learn from it. It's how you handle failure dictates how you'll handle the rest of your life.
Yes, Nick. How you handle failure dictates the rest of your life. Do you take it with grace? Do you learn from your mistakes and keep going and become highly successful? Or do you get smacked down, hit the ground, and never get back up? Personally, I've been hit a lot in my life, both in martial arts training and martial arts reality. Also, in my time as a firefighter paramedic, sometimes police officers and paramedics look similar. And sometimes when someone dials 911, they try and hit you. No, thankfully, I've lots of martial arts skills, so I didn't get hit too many times. But, that's part of life. But yeah, you can't be afraid to try. I absolutely love that, Nick. I'm going to add one thing from the architect perspective. When people are building an architecture career, two things: open-mindedness, communication skills, and never, ever, ever think you can do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Find the Nicks of the world. Maybe there's a Nick for penetration testing, and maybe there's a Nick for defensive security. Use them both.
That's
And
absolutely
then
true.
find the Harry that's the network architect that's strong, and the Sally that's the database architect, and the Jane that's the big data architect. Build your team, because what Nick knows about security is far more than any other person that's going to focus on a generic thing like an end-to-end system design, because that's what he does. But if he's busy focusing on end-to-end on security, he can't focus on end-to-end system design. Not because Nick doesn't have the capabilities. He's got the capabilities to do both, but you can't be in two places at the same time. And the second he's deep involved in a firewall, I can tell you what, he's not looking at the IP addressing scheme for the whole enterprise. So pick where you want to be. You can be the generalist or the specialist. Specialists get paid more, but if you're an architect, your skill is based upon how many Nicks you know.
That's right.
And your ability to work with the Nick and convince the Nicks to help you. It has nothing to do with how good you are, because you'll never replace Nick in his security knowledge. You can't do it. And I'd rather 50 Nicks on my architecture than me try to think I'm good enough to do it all. And I've got 25 years plus experience, and I was the lead architect at Cisco. So it's not like I don't have any experience. I'm still going to bring Nick with me every time.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And the other part is as long as I've been doing it, I don't know everything, and that's the other part is be humility. A little bit of humility in this world will get you a whole lot farther.
And know what you know and know what you don't know.
Yep, and don't be afraid to say I don't know. Don't be afraid to say I don't know. The best follow up to I don't know is let me find out.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're at it on things to help people build their careers, it's one thing to bring you a problem, and it's another thing to give you a problem and a solution all at the same time. So I know you've got some place to be. I know we're doing this offline because you're so in high demand. So, I'm beyond honored to have you here, Nick. As I've let you know in the past, I've got a bunch of engineers and architects that are happy to volunteer and help out as interns for you.
I appreciate that.
Because that's how much we love you guys over there at Aura Systems. I told some of my students there was some blockchain things, some cloud things, and they're like, let us help them. So
I can't wait, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't be thankful enough for the opportunities, just to hang out and learn about you, talk to you, and everything else, and all the kind of stuff that we've got coming down the line. It's an absolute pleasure on my part.
And I'm so thrilled to have you here. So thank you so much, Nick.
Thanks, Mike.
It was so nice having you join us for this video today. Let me tell you about some free services we do for the cloud community. We have a free How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar, where we tell you all the things you need to do and know to get your first cloud architect job. In addition to that, we actually have a free question and answer session live on YouTube, where you can come and ask us any questions you want about building your career related to cloud computing or networking, and we'll answer them in real time for you because we want to get you to your goals. Several more times per week, we have guests from industry experts that I've known for decades that are movers and shakers that have changed the world, that can give you information so you can build the best career. I invite them periodically. They are on my show. If there's a chance to do some free training on our channel, we'll do it live because we want you to all to have the best skills for the best career. So please subscribe and hit the bell. I look forward to seeing you, and I look forward to assisting you in your technology career. Thank you so much. This is Michael Gibbs from Go Cloud Architects.